From the Lincoln Journal-Star, this is the Life in the Red podcast with Luke Mullen and Amy Just.
Hey folks, welcome back to the Life in the Red podcast. Luke Mullen and Amy Just here with you again, breaking down all things Nebraska sports as we are here now in I guess, late March, technically.
Almost April.
Yeah, I know. Spring football is underway. The Husker Hoops women's basketball team, they were in the NCAA Tournament. That'll be a big focus of today's episode, talking about that, wrapping up that season. Men's basketball, they're in their postseason. Spring sports going on right now. Kind of that point of the year where there's still a bit of overlap, but we're here getting to a little bit more of the stretch run for spring sports and everything. But we'll get into some spring football talk, some Husker Hoops action as well. But first off, starting things off with some national champions to talk about in wrestling. Nebraska this week in Husker sports. Ridge Lovett wins a national championship at 149 pounds. And Terrell Taylor also wins national title there in the 157-pound weight class. And phenomenal year. This Husker wrestling team, obviously everybody knows what Penn State does. They won the national title, but second place for Nebraska. How about that?
First time ever that they've finished that high. First time since the 80s where Nebraska's had two national champions in the same year. Ridge was Nebraska's first individual national champion since Jordan Burroughs. And then, of course, Trelly follows it up like 15 minutes later with one of his own. So a really, really special day for them. Every single wrestler, Nebraska sent 9 to the NCAA championships. Every single wrestler that they sent scored several points. And 8 of the 9 ended up earning All-American status. So incredible showing for them. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Brock Hardy, who made the national championship match in his weight class. Fell just short, dealing with some stomach issues. Horrible timing for that, but still managed to put up some points in that match. He lost 12-9.
Yeah, and certainly I think you give a credit, of course, to that coaching staff, Mark Manning and his assistants. They're so good, so consistent year in, year out, and also got the chance to hear from Nash Hutmaker, former wrestler at Pro Day. He said he was watching on his phone. He was jumping out of his seat there at those national title matches. So yeah, congratulations there to those members of the Husker wrestling team. Brief update for you, what's going on with these spring sports. Still some struggles for the Husker baseball team. Now 10-14 overall, 2-7 in Big Ten play. Most recent game, a midweek loss, 12-8. They fell to Kansas State. That game kind of got away from them. We talked a little bit about a little week or two ago about the bullpen. Still figuring out that pitching. The starting pitching has done well, but the bullpen still coming along. And guess what? It's the toughest weekend series of the year coming up. Number 5 Oregon State coming to Lincoln for a 3-game series. It's going to be a tough one for Nebraska.
Yeah, I will say I thought it was really special before the K-State game that they had 2 of Greg Sharp's daughters throw out the first pitch, one wearing K-State stuff, one wearing Nebraska stuff. Just very special, just knowing how much Sharp meant to both of those programs.
Yes, we miss you, Sharpie, definitely. As well, your Husker softball update, number 20, Nebraska softball. They're rolling. They've won 11 of their last 13. That includes 3-game sweep of Minnesota here at home over the weekend, and then they shut out Omaha on Wednesday. Jordy Ball continues to dominate in the circle. This team is scoring runs at a high clip. They're, I think, top 5 in scoring, one of the top home run hitting teams in the nation. And they got Purdue this weekend. That is the 3-game series over the weekend, but certainly things looking up. And as this is a softball team that expects to contend for the Big Ten, having that 3-game sweep last weekend, they're going to look to keep that momentum rolling this time.
We'll see how many games that they can get in, knock on wood. Yeah. Not expected to be a beautiful weather weekend with some rain and thunderstorms projected. Now, it's not a traditional weekend series. It's Saturday, Sunday, Monday, which you're like, that's weird. It was in an effort to get more softball on the Big Ten network. So if you look around the league, you see some of those quirky weekend series, air quotes, to try to get some more national television for those programs. But we'll see how many games they get in.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, too, because this last Saturday, the game was, I think, the fifth highest attended game in Nebraska softball program history. So those Saturday games, those are usually some of the big ones. Friday can be difficult for people to get off work in time. So I think, maybe they were looking at that, but when the weather is going to wreak havoc on those plans too, yeah, that'll be tough. So we'll see again these weekend series for Husker baseball and softball. They will be here in Lincoln. So that's your update here around Husker sports. And as we get into a Husker hoops update, first some big news that you certainly have been looking forward to.
Yes.
The state outlines coming back to PBA, people.
Yes. So this had been in the works for a while. It was a parting gift from Trev Alberts, the new court that just had the block N at midcourt. Very few people seemed to love it. It's very basic, very Wisconsin-like. But yeah, bring in the state outline back, but not just that. There's going to be the basketball Herbie logo, which is, if you're a deep Nebraska ball stan, there's some lore with that. So I like it. Some people like the state outline. They don't like Herbie. Some like both. Some are like, why are you changing the court? Like, we just changed it, even though it kind of sucks. Like, what? Like, do we really need a new court? Yes, they did. You can put your tinfoil hat on. I know I've said this on the podcast before. The men were undefeated at home with the state outline, and then this year they were 4-6 or something like that. So maybe bring the state outline back. I know Kent Pavelka is very happy about it. It will make his calls a little bit more fun by making them from Dorchester. Two super small design notes on that, not to get too into it. It's not just the state outline. There's a star over where Lincoln is, which is really cool. And for those font people, the N on the baseline will be what it's supposed to be. As it is, it's missing a serif, and it has driven me crazy for the last several years. But the serif is coming back, so thank God.
Yeah, good news with the court, and certainly I think, the shooting from different areas of the state, that's fun. Everybody likes that, and still, I think certainly it was a clean look to the court this year. Look clean, but this is more fun.
Yeah,
that's what I like.
And
I like having fun, people.
Yeah, and you have the red in the lines, which is cool. That's different. Originally, they just wanted to put the. It sounded like they wanted to just put Herbie back out there, and then after a bunch of feedback, they changed the court design entirely for the most part. So I like it. Some people don't, but I don't know. It's fun, and it's different. Like, you're allowed to have different identities for your different sports. It's okay. You don't have to have the same identity for absolutely everything.
Yeah, and everybody has their opinion, but I think we saw the reaction from the fans. The court was back. People were excited about that.
Yes, yeah. It's interesting. Social media loved it for the most part, and then some of the message boards at our rival competitors, some people on there were not big fans, which I thought was interesting. But
well, we'll see. We'll see what kind of results come on that court. Maybe we'll be revisiting this topic here in a year's time. But that is the news confirmed by Athletic Director Troy Dannon this week about the state outline coming back to PBA. And in terms of the teams who will be playing there, let's talk about Husker Women's Hoops, who did end their season at the NCAA Tournament this last week. First round tournament loss, really back and forth throughout, game of runs. And as we've seen from this Husker team all year long, they got down at times, but if there's one thing they knew how to do was fight. And that went right down, of course, to the wire. The last second foul call, Britt Prince there called for the charge in the lane. Such a tough way to end that season and to end a great, well-played NCAA tournament game.
Yeah, well played is probably not the word that I would use. It was pretty ugly, actually, with all the turnovers and just missed opportunities that they had. But even though they didn't play great, they still found a way to be in it late. That last shot, Logan Nisley, I mean, she was 3 for 3 going into that. From my vantage point, I thought that was going in before it kind of rimmed out. Which that would have, changed the tenor of everything as you went through the rest of the game. But man, hard fought. It just wasn't there for them, which is unfortunate because you lose a bunch of seniors that this would have meant a lot to, especially Alexis Markowski. But yeah, with everything that happened for them this season, losing two very key players, Alexis not being 100% this season and playing on it anyway, and then losing Britt for a period of time. For them to get back to the NCAA tournament after everything is an incredible statement, and I can't wait to see what they do next season.
Yeah, this obviously the first round loss, it's going to sting, but 3 NCAA tournaments in the last 4 years. How good is that for a program just to have that consistency of being an NCAA tournament team? Because that kind of breeds expectations year in, year out, right?
Yeah, absolutely. As Alexis has said many times, she thinks back to her freshman year of making that NCAA tournament. And then, last season, right, them, having a chance to make it to the Sweet 16 and not quite getting there, it just helps build expectations and a culture within a program that, making it to the NCAA tournament shouldn't just be celebrated. It should also be expected. And so I think that the young group of players will continue to carry that forward. Now you just have to figure out who replaces Alexis Markowski, which is a big, big ask.
Yeah, the off-season decisions are going to be coming soon. And yeah, the season just ended, but as ever, the question, what's next? Of course, for this Husker women's team, Alexis Markowski, such an important player, one of the best Husker women's players there over the last decade. She's, of course, graduating. Alberta Rimdahl, Kendall Moriarty, and Kendall Coley. They are also out of eligibility. Then you have the players coming back from injury. Natalie Potts, Allison Widener, Kennedy Williams, too. She'll be back. She's been running around in softball. She's been playing in softball, don't worry. Still wearing a leg brace, so they're still worrying about that ACL recovery, but she'll be back out there. Continued growth of some of these young players on the roster, too. It's an interesting mix of things of the players you have coming back and then losing Markowski, too. But as you kind of just look big picture, if you had to identify one position, one area, what do you think Amy Williams needs to do in the transfer portal?
Yeah, it needs to figure out just that post presence. Getting Natalie back is going to be huge, but you need somebody else down there. And Alexis is just what she was able to do for this team, not just scoring, not just rebounding, but being a leader. Basically, since she got here, that's going to be really vital to replace.
Yeah, I would say you look at the team generally, you'd say the guard play is going to be good. Britt Prince, Callan Hake, of course, coming back as well, and Allison Widener if she's able to come back from that injury. But yeah, certainly the depth, and of course, if you're going to be going into the portal, you never know who's out there, right? You could get a big impact starter, so that'll be something that's interesting to watch. And I think let's talk about it now, the timing of this portal, because college football season came around and coaches were up in arms about when the portal is open. And we're kind of seeing that a little bit here now too. Not maybe as much because, yeah, there are a lot of teams eliminated from the tournament already who feel fine about going about their business. But it's Sweet 16 weekend. We got coaches who are leaving for jobs, players whose teams have been eliminated. Is this really a good time for the transfer portal to be open for college basketball?
So I asked Fred about it yesterday because he did his pre-crown, tournament availability, and he doesn't like it a lot. He really hated it last year when it opened and they were doing NCAA tournament prep. So at least they have a week before they go to Vegas to get some visits in and focus on that a little bit. But he wants it to be open after the Final Four. I definitely see the argument there. But as a former friend of the show, Wilson Moore, had a hot take. And I also see the point with this is, for the teams that, didn't have great seasons or are having coaching changes, there should be an advantage for them to be able to take advantage of the portal because, on paper, they need it more. So curious to see what happens there. And we had this chat with in a football frame of mind earlier, right? When the portal's open during the college football playoff, but there's no fixing that portal window because of, they're student athletes and you got to get enrolled in school. So I don't know what the right answer is. I I see both sides to it, but it definitely makes for a very interesting March.
Yeah, I think when I first looked at this, I was like, well, just push it back 2 weeks. Like, you still got time in April. You can run through the portal on that. And I do agree with you. Wilson, then he's been in my ear. He was saying, hey, don't forget about all those, hundreds of teams that didn't make the NCAA tournament. Like, are they just going to stand pat for 4 weeks, 6 weeks, do nothing? Like, time waits for nobody. You got to get out and get that roster done. So I see it both ways. It certainly is a crazy, chaotic period for coaches and those teams that are still ongoing in their season and figuring out next year. And that's kind of the case for the men's basketball team, not the NCAA tournament, but as you mentioned, first game in the Crown tournament this Monday night against Arizona State. That'll be played in Las Vegas. And the Huskers will look a little bit different for that matchup due to some injuries. Rolly Wooster, his foot injury, he's out. Braxton Mia, game time decision as well there from a personnel standpoint. And from a coaching perspective, a little bit of news. Assistant coach Adam Howard has moved on too. He will be joining Will Wade's staff at NC State.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me that Adam left for that opportunity. He's good friends with Will, and it's closer to home for Adam. There's some family there, so a really tough decision. He liked being here. He loved this. He loved working with the staff. He loved this team. But when you get an opportunity to be close to family, closer to home, you got to take the opportunities when it comes. So nobody's really faulting him for that.
Mm-hmm. And as we look to the future of this Husker men's program, of course, the transfer portal, it's how Fred Hoiberg builds these teams. Let's be real about that. But same question to you as about the women's team. One position, one area that he needs to prioritize. What do you think it is?
Well, everywhere. I mean, they lose
it could be everything.
They lose so many guys in terms of, not even thinking about who could potentially leave for the transfer portal, but guys who've run out of eligibility. Like, yeah, you get Rink Mast back, but all right, who's your point guard going to be? Because you lose all of them, other than Sam, of course. But, who's replacing Bryce Williams? Who's replacing Jawan Gary? Who's replacing Raleigh/Aaron? And you can go all the way down the line for that. So there's a lot of pieces to fill. So I just think you need talented bodies at this point. And I'm not really keying in on one position because they just lose so many pieces from every part on the floor.
Yeah, it's like those teams in the draft that go best player available.
Yep.
That's what they need.
Yeah. Yep. Yes. And my eyebrows went up when I saw William Kyle back in the portal again. Yeah. Bring him home.
Target a year ago, was he not?
Yeah. Yep. Bring him home. So that would be cool.
Yeah, that would be a big addition. And we'll expect, of course, some fireworks, some additions, because this Nebraska team, they have some roster spots to fill. So
quite a few, actually.
That'll be ongoing here the next couple weeks. And as we wrap up today, let's talk a little spring football. That is ongoing, started this week for Nebraska. They've already practiced 3 times, and we got a little sneak peek, a little glimpse into today's morning practice inside Memorial Stadium. Some of the normal drills, the normal stuff that you see, but anything kind of jump out from what we saw this morning?
Yeah, I just was excited to see some one-on-ones. That's always fun, where you've got a quarterback throwing to a wide receiver, in one-on-one coverage with the DB, and most of the throws looked pretty good. So it all came down to the one-on-one there for receiver/DB. And Emmett looked pretty decent. I know he's not a receiver, but he's a pass-catching running back. And Dylan looked pretty good. And then a couple of the throws from Jalen Gramstad had quite a bit of zip on them. So,
yeah. And I think from what the coaches have said, kind of the first 2 practices were maybe not as much, hitting and going around the field, a lot of installation in terms of the packages, the different adjustments that they want these players to make. But certainly from what we saw today, those wide receiver DB matchups, those were getting feisty. And then I was just interested to see some of the new assistant coaches, out there in their position groups. Was just looking at Phil Simpson. He had about 5 guys who were working with him as that outside linebacker group. And then Rob Dvorak was coaching the linebackers. I'm sure there were some guys running back and forth when we weren't there, but was interested to see how that worked out. And then just getting a look at the offensive line, I mean, Elijah Pritchett, I mean, he just looked like built, muscular, very steady on his feet. And again, we're watching, 15, 20 minutes of drills. Don't get me wrong. We don't have hours of film that we were breaking down, but he looked good as well. And yeah, certainly the interesting thing as well was you look at last spring and they were using, 3-4 practice fields, running guys over between stations. And I'm sure they're still doing some of that, but the roster's smaller. And
The
it's
grass
only going to
fields
get smaller.
The grass fields are torn up,
I
so you
know.
don't have as much space. So yeah, that's why they're kind of using more of the indoor and Memorial, because the grass fields are a bunch of dirt at the moment.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the story this spring to me is the roster limits. The other story got to be just potential. How do they get better? The young core versus all those transfers that they brought in. That's got to mesh somehow and keep progressing that Dana Holgorsen offense and see how the new defense looks. But at the end of the day, they're 20, 25, whatever it is, over the roster limit. And certainly you don't want to be making all those cuts in the fall. There's going to have to be some guys moving on after the spring.
Yeah, and that's just the way it's going to be, because then, all right, you monitor who leaves. You might have to bring in some more guys too. So you might have to cut more than you want just to be able to have spots over the summer ahead of camp. Yeah, it's going to be a very active portal season, not necessarily just for Nebraska, but everywhere.
Yeah, most definitely. So that's something that will be ongoing this spring that we'll be keeping our eye on. And then something else, just brief to touch on, happened this week here inside the football facility. Pro Day, always a nice opportunity for the NFL draft hopefuls to show out in front of NFL scouts. And I think the key guy, Ty Robinson, of course, the top NFL draft participant here on the Nebraska roster, didn't do the on-field testing. And you kind of expect that guys that have gone to the combine, they had that chance. You got to optimize your body, of course, for the combine. So they were working hard for that. But the scouts were there, other guys, Nash Hutmaker, MJ Sherman, John Bullock, all sorts, Jamal Banks, Isaiah Nair, working out there.
Thomas Fedoni.
Yep, Fedoni as well, key NFL draft guy. And as you kind of look at that group, it's kind of promising because you take it back a year or two and, no NFL draft picks, right? I mean, that broke that 50-plus year streak. And still, there's some work to do, I think, for Matt Rule to get the program back to being an elite, NFL producing caliber team. But 4 guys invited to the combine. Ty Robinson is, potentially, what is he, second round pick most places?
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty good for this Nebraska team.
Yeah, he's going to be the highest in a while. So not as long as you think, obviously. Cam Jurgens went pretty high, but
yeah, so you second round pick as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
So could be really good for him, and he's shining by all accounts in just about every place, whether that's on-field testing or interviews, and I'm not surprised by that at all. Dude's a bright guy. He wants to be a pediatrician one day. But he's got plenty of football, I think, left in him before he goes to med school.
Definitely. Very, very, very dominant this fall. And scouts will see that if they turn on the tape, most definitely. So that is your spring football update. And of course, more coverage from this spring. We'll have more glimpses into Husker football practices, more that we hear from coaches and players. All those updates for you will be online at journalstar.com. That'll do it for today's episode of the Life in the Red podcast. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next time.
Thank you for listening to this week's Life in the Red podcast. Our theme music is composed by Sasha Indy. The stories continue on journalstar.com.